Welcome to the Early Founder Podcast. My name is Philip, and I'm the founder of Launchpad, a high school startup incubator where I lead high schoolers nationwide through the startup process with the help of industry veterans. Along this journey, I was curious to see what makes an entrepreneur successful, what traits, experiences, and habits they possess, especially while they're young. So that's why I made the Early Founder, to have conversations with those who have made massive breakthroughs at a young age and to share their experiences with other aspiring founders. Today's guest is Ankur Boyed, the 19-year-old co-founder of Boardy AI, an AI-driven platform that has recently gone viral for redefining professional networking. Boardy has raised $8 million in seed funding from Creandum, which combined with pre-seed funding makes their total stand at $11 million, fueling its mission to build AI that seamlessly interacts with humans. Previously, Ankur founded Beaver Labs, a generative AI development agency, which was acquihired by Boardy AI. Now he's focused on pioneering AI solutions that enhance how professionals connect and collaborate. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ankur.
Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. Appreciate it.
Okay, so my first question is, where does your company stand today, and what milestone are you most proud of so far?
Yeah, that's a big question. So for context, we're building Boardy. Boardy is this AI, this digital human that has a conversation with you over the phone. He learns about who you are and what you do, and then he connects you with relevant people in his network. That's where Boardy stands today. And so as of now, we've raised, as you mentioned, we raised some funding, but Boardy has helped founders find investors. He's gotten people into startup accelerators, and he's even helped people find jobs. So Boardy has had conversations with 25,000 people as of today.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so, yeah, thank you, man. And so that's where Boardy stands today.
Great. So can you tell me what a typical day in the life looks like as a co-founder?
Yeah. So I think Boardy's a little bit atypical in the sense that most startups have between 1 to 3 co-founders. Boardy is actually a little bit different, and I can go into the reason why.
Sure.
But basically, Boardy has 5 co-founders, and there's 3 co-founders that are on the growth and product side, and there's 2 co-founders that are on the technical side. So me and my brother, we ran this development agency beforehand that we were talking about, Beaver Labs. We were actually the technical co-founders. My brother's the CTO, and I am sort of just everywhere on a technical standpoint. And we have the CEO, Andrew D'Souza. We have CFO, Matt Stein. He's an investment genius. And then we have some other growth people as well. And then we have Shen as well, who's just really good at making relationships. And so in terms of the day in the life, from my perspective, at Boardy, it's oftentimes just wake up, see what is going on, see what are the biggest problems in the business as it stands, and just start working towards them. That role has sort of shifted over time. I used to be someone who, we used to have this linear board, this Jira board of all these tasks that we had to do. And I would just start cranking through them as any regular engineer would. But I've tended to see that if you just focus on one thing at a time, and just focus on fixing that one biggest problem in the business at a time, then that actually causes the biggest impact. So for me, generally speaking, I just wake up, identify what is the biggest, most important thing for me to be working on at the time, and just go ham at that. Oftentimes I'm staying up until for the last couple of weeks, I've just been up until midnight because of how viral we've gone. There's just been so many. It's really good. It's a really good problem to be facing, but just lots of work that needs to be put in. So yeah, that's a day in the life.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like a really exciting time for your company.
Yeah.
So now rewinding a bit to the early spark, right? Can you tell me about your first experiences with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would call myself a builder at heart. I was very much of the type that just wanted to go to a good university for software engineering, and I was just really into building technology. So in middle school, for example, I got really into flying drones, and there was this drone competition that we entered into as part of my school, and I remember just waking up and be like, dude, I do not want to fucking go to class. And just like on some days I'll just not go to school, and just like work on this drone, like every day for like several months. I used to only go to like the math and science classes, I think, and then just skip like art and English class, I remember, to work on this. But that was really fun. I think that really got me into like building and sort of pivoted my direction into like building electronics. And then, as part of the drone competition, ended up winning like a 4th place international prize, which was like really cool. But it showed me that like I have this passion for just like building things, that is like, that outmatches anything that I've ever experienced before. Like outmatches any school experience, any studying, like all that kind of stuff. And so I realized, and so this is actually perfect timing, because when COVID happened, we were all obviously just alone in our rooms, right? And having that first experience transitioned me into, or sort of blossomed me into like experiencing this world of new technology. So I got really into programming, I got into 3D printing, and actually that's where my first experience happened with entrepreneurship, was 3D printing. I saw that there was a lot of, a lot of people were like looking for hobbies and things to do. And I was like, I had this 3D printer in my basement now, and I personally, when I got a 3D printer, like I was blown away. I was like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, because you can literally like craft an idea and then like literally see it come to life in the span of a couple of hours. And around that time, people were obviously looking for new hobbies and passions. So I'm like, okay, like not many people have like 3D printers, so like let's open a 3D printing business. And for me, like it was mostly just to share my passion for 3D printing. Didn't like make that much revenue or anything of that nature. It was mostly just like ad cost, so didn't make much profit from that. But I think it was seeing the smiles on people's faces after they, came to me with this idea, and I literally gave them a physical version of it, and I even showed them like a time lapse of how it was built, and I just saw like the inspiration that they had in their eyes, the awe that they had in their eyes, and that really inspired me. I think I was blown away by that, and I just thought to myself, like, how can I continue to do this more? And so eventually I just like started building more and more businesses, and that's how I am like here today.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I think what's been a common thread for a lot of founders is they utilize that period of COVID super well, right?
Yeah.
That's when they like ignited their passion. That's when they like started working with technology. And I think your story is a testament to that as well. So moving into the creation of something of your own, when did you realize you actually wanted to build, leading to the creation of Beaver Labs?
Yeah, I think we probably need to backtrack a little bit, because before Beaver Labs, there was a lot of stuff happening before that.
Yeah,
so
tell me about
I told you I started this 3D printing business, and I guess the main realization I had was like after doing it for a couple months, I was like, okay, this is cool, but like I see all these like software platforms, and they're like able to help millions of people. And I thought to myself, like, how can I do the same thing, right? Like, with this 3D printing business, I can maybe help, like, 100 people in my community every couple of months. But with software, you deploy, like, one piece of code, and then, boom, like, you are impacting millions of people, potentially, right? And so that really, like, got me into the field of software, transitioning away from 3D printing into the field of software. So, I sort of had this idea of, like, how do we, impact people through entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing that came to my mind was obviously the education system, because the education system is completely broken, and that's like a whole nother podcast in itself. But I think like around that time, what I wanted to build was something that helps people like learn, right? I like my belief at the time was that there's not enough like of the most intelligent people are sharing their experiences with the world. Right. And I guess like hats off to you, because you're doing exactly that with this podcast.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, so how can we get like these super intelligent, like these industry experts to like create content, right? And so naturally, what that ended up becoming was like this platform where, for these technical content creators, based on the content of what they write about, we actually recommend them sponsorship opportunities, right? Because one of the ways that you convince people to work on to do something is through a financial obligation, right? Yeah. By offering them money. But honestly, man, like that ended up turning into something that I didn't want to build because effectively it just became an affiliate marketing startup. And an affiliate marketing startup plus like with a bit of technology lathered on top of it, obviously. And we were playing with OpenAI's APIs at the time, and so that was like a really good like introduction to tech and like AI for us. But we ended up like realizing that you need a lot of distribution for this kind of stuff. You can't just build a tech and just expect it to work and expect a million people to start using it, right? And so that's how we got into Beaver Labs, was because we have this passion for building technology, but we don't know how to market things, and that's the critical thing that's required to impact people, right? To get people to use the things that you build. And so we were like, okay, let's instead just like learn from other people. Let's leverage our technical capability and let's work with people that have that marketing expertise. And that's how Beaver Labs was formed. So we've effectively built this development agency where, we found people who were like, okay, I need to build this type of startup. Like, for example, a cryptocurrency startup. They were going to do all the marketing, all the brains, all the, in the sense of like acquiring users and all that kind of stuff. And we were going to just build the products for them. So that was actually the first thing that, our first client was a cryptocurrency exchange, which for a 17-year-old that's barely written any code was like kind of mind blowing. Like I'm like, how the hell am I going to build a cryptocurrency exchange? Because you're dealing with people's money and you need to like learn how to like work with, like you need to build a scalable and reliable system that keeps both parties' money intact, right? And so that's sort of like, I guess, how I transitioned properly from 3D printing into software was through this development agency. And yeah, that's how Beaver Lab started.
Yeah, super, super inspiring. I think chronologically that makes a lot of sense too, right? How you moved from like physical products into software and then realized, okay, marketing is super important. That's what I'm going to do now. So once you created Beaver Labs, what were the very first steps you took to get things off the ground? How did you get this early validation and traction?
Yeah, we actually, it was actually a very serendipitous moment for us when we started Beaver Labs, because we actually got our first client by luck. We met him at a house party, and as I said, like this cryptocurrency exchange that we had to build, that was our first client. He was actually working with these other developers in India, and they were totally screwing him over, which is actually a very common practice with building software, especially overseas. And so he was like, okay, there's like these young kids that are like ambitious. They have a bit of track record. They've built a couple things in the past, and they honestly took a leap of faith by working with us. And we're obviously like super grateful for that, because that's how things started. Was because we just like serendipitously met this dude at a house party, realized that, okay, we want to work together. And then, their platform is actually alive today. And it's very profitable. So that's like, the way that we got our first client was very much by luck, but the way that we expanded was very different. We did a lot of different things. We first tried out in Fiverr. We were like, okay, there's obviously people that, I guess the main problem that we needed to fix was like getting clients, right? Because we had the technology, the technical capability, but we just needed to get people to work with us. And so we're like, okay, Fiverr is like a good place to find those people. But what we found is that Fiverr is not the best place to find those people, because oftentimes you have, like, Fiverr is a marketplace where people are looking to basically barter and negotiate for the lowest price to get something done. And it actually creates a very negative type of feedback loop, because you have people who don't have money and you have people who are begging for money. And oftentimes it creates this environment where the people that are on Fiverr that are doing the work, like the people on the on Fiverr that are doing the work, or like the freelancers, they end up often skimping out on the actual work itself. And then on the other side, you have, because there's this sort of like level of distrust, because Fiverr has like this sort of has created this sort of air of distrust. You have people on the other side that are giving the money, that are like trying to squeeze every dollar from these freelancers, right? And so our first experience with Fiverr was horrible. We worked with this company in the UK that was literally charging like we charged them like $1,000 to build a fully fledged application. Like that application would have taken $20,000 to build. And man, like the level of like disrespect that we saw from them the level of like penny pinching. They're like, dude, we need this to be absolutely perfect, and they didn't even have any users, right? So like why are they doing this, right? And so from my perspective, like Fiverr was just not a good place to look for these kind of people. Now what did actually end up working was referrals. So, and also just a lot of like going to conferences and stuff. So, obviously like we, like at that point, like me and my brother, we had built up this community of people. Like we used our own personal networks to like reach out to people, be like, do you know someone who might want to work with us? Do you know someone who might want to work with us? And a lot of it, like I remember, like I think we found our third client by going to Collision, which is a conference in Toronto, and it was like at an after party, and I just like walked up as a random dude, and just like chatted up for an hour, and then I didn't realize that he was the CEO of this company, and he's like, dude, I'm looking for like some generative AI work to be done, because obviously AI started booming at this time, and we're like, dude, like he was like, dude, how can we make generative AI like part of my business, right? And so that's how we got our second clients. So a lot of it was just like meeting people, networking, and a lot of word of mouth referrals, as opposed to like sort of going onto these other platforms, running ads. Like we actually found that running ads was like not the best way to, we actually didn't get any clients from like running ads. And so, yeah, I would say we mostly grew through word of mouth.
Yeah, that's very cool. And that actually makes a lot of sense with what you're doing with Boardy now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So can you walk me through the process of being like acquihired by Boardy? And what was the process and transition like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for context, like around the time, I think this was what was it? January 2024. We had grown the Beaver Labs team to 8 people, and we had 3 weeks of runway left before we were like basically done. And yeah, which means like in 3 weeks, like the company will like, basically shut down. And so we were like, dude, we need to like go ham and just like find anyone who could help us out and anyone who we could become clients with, because work was drying up for us at that time. And by a stroke of luck, one of my brother's friends, who was previously a YC founder, now was part of this new accelerator, this hacker house in San Francisco. And he was talking to one of his, I guess like one of the co-founders at that residency, and realized that, oh yeah, there's actually a good fit, because this person's looking for development work, and Beaver Labs can provide some work as well, right? And so, we were like, okay, we need to take this opportunity, because it is going to like absolutely like change our business. It's gonna bring it back to life. You know what I mean? And so at that residency, I was working like literally 18 hours per day with this company. Wow. It was crazy, man. Like genuinely the hardest thing I've ever done, because they were rebranding, repivoting their entire company, and they gave us like 4 weeks to do it. So it was like, I would say that was like a formative moment in my life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think what we sort of realized at that time was like, okay, we're putting in so much effort into building these products for companies and building these products for startups, but like most of the time, like a lot of these startups just like end up failing, right? And we see some of the decisions that these people make with these when it comes to these startups. Like for example, that the startup I was working with that I spent 18 hours a day on, like they decided to add this feature that literally doubled the amount of development work that would have required it, and they added so much risk to the project that like I had to literally come in, my immature like self was like, okay, I need to do everything I can to impress these clients, and I like came in and just worked so hard on it, but like it ended up not being that useful in the end, right? And I think this is sort of the realization that we came to, which is that after working with like 15 startups over the course of Beaver Labs, we realized that like most startups don't really know what the hell they're doing, especially like when it comes to marketing and like growth and that kind of stuff. Like it's honestly just a shot in the dark. And so we're like, okay, dude, we can definitely do a way better job than like these people. And so we started thinking about like, okay, screw Beaver Labs, let's just like build our own thing, right?
Yeah.
Now around that time, we actually started working with Andrew D'Souza, who was now the CEO of Boardy.
Yeah.
And he was actually at that residency. And I think it was sort of just like, so basically the way that it was working was like, I was working with this one company because we had like a bunch of work to do with them. But like my brother, Abhi, he was sort of like, cowboying and like working with like consulting for these other companies. And Andrew like realized something in the Beaver Labs team and in Abhi. And he was like, man, like these like young AI native people are able to accomplish so much more than people who are like software developers who have been in the industry for 20 years, right? And so he actually thought that like we had a team of 20 people because at that time we were working with 7 of the 12 companies at the H0 residency. But in reality, it was just 8 people just like working really hard. And so that was sort of the reason why he was like, okay. And so yeah, I guess after working with us, with Abhi for some time and then also with me for some time, he was like, guys, like, I actually just want you to join Boardy full time, and I want you to be my co-founders. Now, and that's how the acquihire quote unquote process started.
I see.
And I would say like for us, acquihire is like it's like a more professional term when it comes to like, you know, there's some cash involved in that kind of stuff. I would say mostly it was just like an offer to join the team with co-founder status basically, and basically become technical co-founders in that company. And, you know, for us, we were deciding like, do we want to like work at another company, or do we want to build our own company, right? But I think what really sold the deal for us was that like Andrew is a absolute visionary. Like he has a huge industry, like he has a lot of connections. He has a superpower of being able to, you know, to just convince people to do things, like work with him. And I think that was really powerful. And also just the fact that we would be able to work with someone who has such a powerful experience because he previously built and sold a unicorn company. And you know, also just the fact that he told us that like, okay, we would have skin in the game. It would be like, we would have equity and we would have like the ability to sort of like shift and mold the direction of the company. At the time, when we got acquihired, like the Boardy was not a thing. Like it was not called Boardy. It was called something else. And so we really went in and like, you know, when we actually ended up deciding to work with them, we sort of went in and built out this voice AI platform and built Boardy into like what it is today. So hopefully that answers the question. I know it was a long story.
No, definitely. That was like a really, really interesting story. You know, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but along this residency or like the people that you met, were there any specific people or events that especially inspired or encouraged you at this stage?
By events, do you mean like events that I went to or like just things that happened?
Yeah, it can be either.
Events that inspired me. I think what was interesting was the sort of premise around the entire residency. I think what they did really well was they made it so that like founders at that residency would basically not have any obligations except for work. It's like, you can effectively consider it like a monastery for like founders, where you sort of go and you just like they cover laundry, they cover food, they cover work, like fitness. They even had like personal trainers in there, meditation sessions, all that kind of stuff. And like everyone's purpose there was to go there and like work their butts off to like flourish their company into something new, like literally transform it. And I think that was really inspiring to me. And I think that's probably how I want to live my life in the future, like, is to be around, like, when you're around people that are all working incredibly hard, and you also just are, and the only thing that you can think about is work, that creates an environment where you're able to accomplish so much in a very short period of time. And we actually did this ourselves. Like, we actually went to Barbados last October, and for 3 weeks, we changed, like, we came in, we're like, okay, we're going to like just grow the company. In those 3 weeks, we rewrote the entire code base. We transformed the entire company. We did our press launch, and we did so much stuff. And it was nice because there was no social obligations. Like, I have no family, no friends in Barbados. food was basically taken care of, and it was just a really nice experience overall. But I think it allowed us to really transform Boardy into what it is today. So I think the thing that inspired me the most from that experience was the sort of environment that residency created that allows people to do their best work.
Mm-hmm. What was the name of the residency that you're talking about?
It was called HF0.
HF0. Yeah, I've heard of it. All right. Now transitioning into building Boardy itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you joined the Boardy team, what were the very next steps in moving the startup forward?
Yeah, that is a really good question. We basically didn't have anything at that time. We didn't really have a product. We were doing a lot of experimentation around connecting startups and investors. Just lots of these like different growth experiments, right? Up until I think October. So I joined properly joined in around May, I think, and up until October, the biggest threat to the business was matching, and it's actually a very difficult thing to solve because this is actually a common problem with all marketplaces, which is that marketplaces face the chicken and egg problem, which is, for example, if you have buyers and sellers. And you're building a platform to connect them together. You need buyers in order to attract sellers, but you need sellers in order to attract buyers, right? Yeah. And we sort of faced the problem with Boardy because we were like, we didn't have, okay, let's say you had 0 users and someone joined the network. Who would you match them to? There's no one to match them with, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we started focusing on to fix that problem was like, okay, we sort of niched down into investors and startups. And honestly, like a lot of the problem that we faced was that people had very specific requests of things that they need, people that they wanted to be matched to, and we just couldn't fulfill those until we had a user base, right? But at the same time, we needed to build a matching solution that actually worked. And so our biggest problem, or the biggest thing that we were figuring out how to do, was number one, grow the company, get as many users in as possible, but number two, on the other hand, like develop a matching solution that is able to entirely encompass what people request, and also develop strong profiles of people on the other side so that when you have a request, you can match it to that person, right? And so, from the growth hacking side, there was a lot of things we did. I remember we sent like a bunch of mass emails to this conference called Collision. Oh yeah, I talked about it before. And to the speakers in that conference. And another thing that we did was we actually started partnering with events. So there was this one event in the UK called Ideas Fest, and that particular, I think the reason why we thought events would be useful is because you have this group a group of people that are coming together to already talk to each other, right? So they're already coming in with the intent to meet each other. So when you, if they all just did the call with Boardy beforehand, you could sort of mash them together and give them a recommendation of who they should meet before the event, right? And that was a smashing success because we got thousands of users for Boardy, number one, so they became part of the larger Boardy network, and that's sort of how we seeded that database of users. But then, there was a really good opportunity for us to test our matching algorithm. And we actually saw, and basically just connect people together within this smaller network of people that are already excited to meet each other. And that was it was very helpful for us. And even to this day, people have been talking about how, the Boardy buddy that they met that Boardy recommended them at Ideas Fest was is still someone that they're in touch with, right? So, and I think that was sort of the biggest proof that we have something that's that is worth building and worth continuing to build. Was the smashing success at Ideas Fest.
That's super cool. So one more thing is, I know that Boardy has utilized social media marketing extremely well. That's how you guys went viral, right? So can you tell me a little bit about that process, and do you have any advice for viral marketing?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I guess to just to be clear, I'm not the biggest viral marketer. There are growth experts on the team that are much better than I am. I'm more so on the technical side, but I can speak to some of the things that we did. the first thing that I think really like made us go viral was that Boardy feels like a human. So when we launched, when we announced our pre-seed in October of last year, Boardy actually had a website, and you had to go to this website and you had to fill out your details. You had to put in your LinkedIn. Boardy would shoot you a call. This is what every other voice AI company is doing right now. Is you go to this website, you fill in your details, and then they give you a call, right? So Andrew, the absolute genius that he is, he's like, dude, we need to be able to make it seem like you're actually talking to a human. And this is how we sort of transformed the company in Barbados in October of last year, was because we realized that, if you just message, like if you actually have the potential or the possibility to message Boardy on LinkedIn, and be able to create these conversations. And this was a new feature that LinkedIn released, was pages messaging. And so we're like, okay, dude, we need to make it so that Boardy, like, just hone in on the marketing channel and really lean into LinkedIn as being the main driver of our users. And I think that's what made us go viral, is the fact that you don't go to this website and you have a sign-in page, or you log in or anything of that nature, or you fill in your details, fill out a form. No, you just message Boardy on LinkedIn, and then he has a conversation with you like it's a real human, right? Yeah. And I think it's actually not necessarily the features that we've built that make Boardy feel human. It's the surrounding product experience, right? And I think that felt so unique to people that it really caught their eye, and that's what made us go viral. And then obviously you just needed some catalyst to make that happen, and that catalyst for us was announcing that $8 billion seed round. Then that just drove a bunch of traffic towards Boardy, and they were like, and then we realized that like people were loving it because of the product experience that we crafted for them.
Definitely. I think by making it so you can message via LinkedIn, you get rid of that added layer of friction that all of your other competitors have, right? That makes a lot of sense. For sure. Yeah.
But it also adds an extra layer of friction, because so this is a problem that we face, which is we're now dependent on LinkedIn, right? So we've obviously talked to LinkedIn; they're totally happy with us. But if you're building a startup, then like you generally, from an engineering standpoint, you don't want to be entirely dependent on relying on an external provider. But we're entirely relying on LinkedIn at the moment. So yeah, we'll see if LinkedIn shuts us down. We'll probably go viral again, number one. But yeah, we'll also have to figure out some other solution.
Definitely.
But
yeah. So I think something that's very, very important for Boardy's success has just been the team, right? You've mentioned that you have 5 co-founders and a really strong team. So how did you guys build your team and find people that you could trust?
Yeah. I think Andrew has a really strong intuition for people. We could have found the smartest engineers on the planet. We could have found, we could have just focused on finding the top talent. But I think what's unique about Andrew is that he's especially focused on establishing a strong company culture. And I think that's critical, because the first few people in your business are the ones that are going to really shape the company and the culture around it, right? So I think what's from the co-founder's perspective, Andrew chose 2 people from his previous company, ClearCo, that were absolute killers. Like, in the sense that, like, Shen is able to close deals with literally anybody on the planet. He's just like I think he has just like a very attractive personality, and he's just like a friend. He's like your boy. You know what I mean? Yeah. And with the other co-founder, Matt, he is like a go-getter, and he has a lot of investor relations. So he knows how to like raise money, raise capital, which is important for a business that is so focused on like a network effects business, right? Like, it's very important for a network effects business where monetization is not the immediate strategy. It's actually acquisition of users and building that network. And then for us, I would say the reason why Andrew chose to work with us is because I think he saw like a lot of our track record, because we've been building stuff for like several years. And also, like, I think he's just very bullish on the idea that like you need like the engineers that are going to be the most powerful in the next 5 years are the ones who grew up with AI in like a very common way. You know what I mean? Like who grew up with AI as opposed to having to learn it. And I think what that means is like a lot of these for a lot it's very important to find these like young people who obviously are strong engineers but know how to use these AI tools to sort of build and create things, right? So that's how we created the founding team. And I think that's how we found us, is because we sort of been playing with OpenAI for like the OpenAI APIs for like a very long time and all that kind of stuff. And we obviously just had this track record. And then when it came to the other people on the team, it was just a lot of like trial and error. We hired for specific roles. Some people just didn't end up being a fit. And we saw that the people who were able to kind of work and find their own niche in the business were the ones that were able to thrive the most. And then that's sort of who our current team is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That actually leads me to my follow-up question, which is, as a young founder yourself, did you face any unique logistical or personal challenges because you were young, or did you find it to be more advantageous?
Yes. Oh my God. This is a huge problem that like I've personally faced. And I'm glad you brought this up because I think ageism in the workplace is it's like not spoken about very often, but I think it's a huge problem. And the reason why I say that is because me personally, like one of the reasons why we actually ended up like not one of the reasons why we wanted to close down the business was because me and my brother were just honestly being manhandled by like older business people that we were working with. And it created this, like, oftentimes we were being emotionally manipulated because we were young and we wanted to prove ourselves to do things that are like very manipulative. Okay. And I guess like one example for that is like one of the companies that we worked with, he like really talked down to me. Like he thought that I knew absolutely nothing. He thought that he was a better developer than I was, even though he hasn't written a single line of code in his life. And so, he sort of viewed himself as like a technical product manager. In reality, he was just a business guy who just wanted to build something. But he was like trying to control me and under the guise of helping me, he was like very much manipulating me and forcing me to do work that is like against like the overall goals of the project and like what my expertise is, and also just like emotionally blackmailing me, to be honest. Like it was terrible. And I think it's a very like it's a very common thing. Like when you go to San Francisco, you will probably find like I think there's obviously a group of people who respect young people very much, and especially the super ambitious ones. But I think there's also just a group of people who take advantage of them, right? Like the entire concept of like unpaid internships, for example, right? People are like, dude, you can work with me for an internship, but I can't pay you. And people take those offers because they want to prove themselves, right? And so when it comes to young people, I think everyone should be treated with respect. And I think it's like, it's very bad. And I think there's just been this culture of like, like treat your interns as like lesser, you know what I mean? Because they have to like prove themselves, or because people think that they don't know as much, right? And that they can be sort of manhandled, or that they're not mature enough or something of that nature, right? So there's like a lot of reasons, but I do think that I've faced personally a lot of these hurdles. And honestly, like for me, like this is kind of weird, but like I grew out my beard to the point where I look like 30 years old to prevent people from like questioning my age. Because if I just like, like I remember like one of the companies I worked with, like only after like 4 to 5 weeks of me working with them did they ask me my age, because they saw my LinkedIn profile, and then they were like, okay, like this person is like legit. But I can guarantee you for sure that if they knew that I was like 19 years old at that time, then they immediately would not want to work. Or they would the tone of the working relationship would be entirely different, right? So yeah, there's a lot of problems there.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever face any unique advantages because of your age, or were they primarily negative?
Yes, I think when you're young, you don't have number one, I think you just have way more energy. You have way more ambition. Um, maybe that's not true. I'll have to see. When I get older, I'll let you know. But I think because you sort of don't really have a lot of these external obligations like kids and marriage, buying a house, like all that kind of stuff, you're able to just hone in on the things that matter to you the most. And when you're young, like you also just learn really fast, and also just the fact that you don't know that much means that you sort of have like this learner's advantage, right? Which means that you're able to like use the tools at your disposal to do what it takes, right? And versus like someone who's been in the industry of like, for example, software engineering for 40 years, they have a very set in stone way of doing things, right? And I think from that perspective, it makes it difficult for them to sort of adapt to the changes that are rapidly happening. So when you're young, because you don't really have that experience, you're able to mold yourself to become what is necessary to accomplish your goals as fast as possible. And I think that's a huge advantage.
Definitely. My next question is, what were your experiences with raising funding, and how did you manage to close these like huge rounds? I know that you have like a co-founder who's specifically responsible for that, but can I hear from your experiences as well?
Yeah, I would say like from my perspective, the way that we closed rounds is like very, very atypical. Like I've never seen this happen in my life.
Okay.
So like our pre-seed round, because Andrew is an ex-Unicorn founder, like he previously built Clear Code to like I think like a $2 billion valuation, or some greater than $1 billion valuation. He just had a lot of investors being like, okay, like I know that you have a track record of just building amazing things, and so when Andrew was like, dude, I'm working on something new, like money just flew to him, and I think that's how he raised like the pre-seed round, and that's sort of when we entered, around the time that we entered, was after that pre-seed round. Now, a seed round is like when you have a little bit more traction, you sort of know what you're building, but like obviously you still need to do a bunch of validation. And the way that we raised our seed round was like, honestly, man, like Boardy just raised the seed round. Like that's basically what happened. So we were talking to all these investors, in Barbados in October, and even for a couple of months before that, we were like, okay, like this is sort of like what we're thinking of, and most of these investors like didn't really get it, and I think people think that that's a bad thing, but it's really not, because it's better to have investors. It's better to have an investor that, like a one investor that is really into your idea, than to have 1,000 investors that are kind of into your idea, because it's probably going to fail. Like if everyone thinks that your idea is unconventional and it's worth funding, that's probably not conventional. Sorry, it's probably not unconventional. It's probably a conventional idea.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, we obviously had hundreds of these conversations. Andrew and Matt, the CFO, and like none of them really stuck, right? But what actually happened was on this one Friday, I think it was like at the end of October, we see a bunch of these calls coming in from like Simon at Creandum, Hanel at Creandum, and like a bunch of these other folks, like email addresses from Creandum. And we're like, dude, who are these guys? Like, and what actually ended up happening was, the Creandum folks, they reached out to Boardy on their own accord, and they're like, dude, and they tried it, and then they're like, dude, you need to try this. Like, they told their entire team, they're like, you need to try this AI right now, this experience. And they were so blown away with it. And it was interesting because we actually ended up soft closing like our next funding round, or like at least committing to wanting to work together by like the next Wednesday. So like they tried out Boardy on like Friday, and then like soft close on Wednesday. And this is a very atypical thing. Like our seed deck was also just like not very typical, and it's part of the reason why we had like an easy time doing it. Obviously, it's not an easy thing. You have to have hundreds of conversations, and we did have those hundreds of conversations. But I think the reason why was, we were sort of building a consumer product, and so people, the investors at Creandum were sort of able to see what we were building and envision where it could go, and I think that was amazing on their part. But then also, like, yeah, man, just Andrew is just a god at raising funds, and I think that's one of his superpowers. And so from that side, it became really easy.
Hmm. Now, moving into, the part where it started to feel real, right?
Mhm.
Like, was there ever a point where you felt like you had was there ever a point where you felt like you had made it big, or you're like, oh my God, like I finally did it?
Oh yeah. I think it was after the press launch. Like the
Hmm.
press launch that we did, I think it was January 14th, announcing our 8 million seed funding. Like when you announce your pre-seed, when you don't really have a product, then like it doesn't really feel real. But I think we, over the winter break, like we just done so much work to refine that product and exactly what it's gonna do, and we basically just turned it into this growth machine. And I think, after that 8 million seed round, I just got like bombarded with like hundreds of messages from people, hundreds of connection requests, and
Yeah.
they were like, "Dude, what you're building is new and it's sick." And I think that was the moment when I realized that like we're probably onto something. But yeah, so that's like yeah, I would say that's probably when it felt
Yeah. Very cool. Just a quick, you don't have to go super in depth with this, but
real. Yeah,
I'm just curious. Like for a company like Boardy, there's obviously pretty intense competition as well, right?
yeah,
So, what do you think is your key differentiator, or like what's your secret to standing out?
yeah. I mean, we've talked about it a lot on this conversation. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's a product experience, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing that most people don't really um, get, that I think we're really focused on, is that we believe that there's going to be a future where um, human relationships with AIs is inevitable, right? I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are like, dude, this is never going to happen. Um, but I think the take that we have on it is also very unique, right? Which is like, well, we want Boardy to be your best friend, but we also want Boardy to get you to meet more people, right? And I think that's a very unique take, because most of these like AI dating, AI like boyfriend girlfriend apps, they're just trying to like grab your attention as much as possible. Okay? And I think those are the sort of like not genuine relationships, but we're actually trying to make it so that you can have a conversation with Bordy as your friend, and he'll help introduce you to other friends. And I think that's sort of the take that, when it comes to all the product decisions that we've made, if we just view it from that lens, that is our North Star. And I think that's the thing that we're going to be able to do really well, is sort of create this feeling of like that you're building a relationship with someone, right? You know, there's like a lot of these tools where you sort of just like like fill in a profile about yourself, and it connects you to people, right? I think BuildSpace did something like that.
Yeah, like
There
with
was yeah,
Sage.
we have Sage, right? But I think, those are super cool, and I think they do serve the purpose. But I think the grander vision for us is like is in building that relationships, sort of having someone as like a partner for you to rely on, and sort of help you in more. Obviously we're just focusing on networking right now, but and building these relationships, but we're focused on trying to basically make it so that you can have an AI friend that is able to do way more than just that, right? Accomplish many functions, like help you accomplish many functions in your life.
For sure. Yeah, that's pretty inspiring. Now moving on to like looking ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, where do you see yourself heading in, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years?
It's a good question. Myself, as in like my role at Boardy, or like Boardy as a whole, or just me personally.
For you personally.
Okay. I think the I think my I have this tendency, like personally, and I think a lot of founders do as well, to very much hyper focus on one thing at a time. And I think it's fair, right? Because like in order to take on big ambitious challenges, you need to go all in, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that's on my mind is like, how do I live a life that I don't regret, right?
Mm.
And so, I've done this a lot in the past. Like for example, I solo traveled Portugal and Spain while building Beaver Labs. That was a really fun
Cool.
time,
That's really cool.
right? And I think I want, like over the next couple of years, I want to think about like, how can I um build a strong foundation for my life that doesn't only involve work, because for the past little while, especially while I was building Beaver Labs, like I let my health go, I let my relationships go, I let my friendships go, and I think that prevented me from actually being able to flourish from a life perspective, but also prevented me from being able to flourish from a work perspective, right? And so I think I'm thinking a lot about like, okay, how do I build strong systems for my life? And so that comes down to living the life of a high performer, right? Someone who's not only able to do work, but also able to manage relationships, and also someone who's able to socialize and able to live a healthy life. And I think those are sort of the things that I'm thinking about nowadays. And in 3 to 5 years, I want to have reached an ideal for those types of systems in my life. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that's where I see myself is continuing to work, but also really flourishing in the other aspects of my life. And I'm currently putting in all the work as well, but I want to drive the other aspects of my life with as much intensity as I do with my work.
For sure. Do you foresee yourself like pursuing college or higher education at all, or and like what are your thoughts on that path?
My thoughts on college and higher education is, I think it's beneficial for people who aren't 100% sure about what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people are, I feel like if you have the goal of working at like Google or like a big tech company, you're probably, this might be a generalization, but my personal belief is that you're probably an ambitious overachiever. An insecure overachiever.
Okay.
An insecure overachiever is someone who has the potential to create like millions, if not billions of dollars of value in this world. But because they're afraid, and because they've been told by, society, their parents, their friends, that, they should take the safe option, that, because of all those reasons, they actually just like create this path that is less than, or doesn't actually help them achieve their greatest potential, right? And so I think generally speaking, if you think that you're an insecure overachiever, like the thing that you should be doing is working towards removing that insecurity and sort of focusing on building these big things. And this sort of goes into college, because I think, if you're an insecure overachiever, you should probably drop out of college. Like I at least my personal belief is that. And the reason why is because I am someone, like, just looking back on my personal history, I was like super stressed about getting into like college, like, and I very luckily ended up getting into one of the best universities in Canada, and ended up first deferring that offer by a year and then just not going. And the reason why I thought that was because, like initially part of me was like, okay, I need to like get a computer science degree, and I need to like learn foundations of technology. But honestly, man, like especially with ChatGPT and like all these new AI tools, knowledge has become like, is going to be, if it hasn't already, knowledge is going to become a commodity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what actually matters in this world is like ambition and people and connections and making opportunities happen, and building things and using your creativity to build things that create value in this world, right? So for me personally, I now realize that my insecurity is the biggest thing that's holding me back. And I think like if I was to go back to university, it would be out of an act of insecurity. And for that reason, I don't plan on going back, because I think I can do so much more. And I think I think a lot of people in university who are doing, interesting things, who are going down these interesting paths, could be doing so much more, right? So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's an amazing take. Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
And if you're down for it, could you also tell me, what you think the future for Boardy is going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 years?
Yeah. There's a lot of paths that we are going down right now. Lots of exploration. But I think the main, so number one is like, we're going to focus on growing the network. as much as possible. We want to get millions of people talking to Boardy every day, right? And then that's when the power of connections really becomes a superpower, right? It really adds leverage to your life. Right now, I would say probably 60 to 70% of people have like gotten value from Boardy, but we want to make that 100% of people, right? That's like so at the core, we are focused on like building relationships with people. Now, on top of that, something that we're also thinking about is how do we map the trajectory of people? How do we use the conversational data that we are gathering on people in order to guide them towards a direction that that is going to basically make them as valuable to other people as possible, right? So, Boardy doesn't only become someone who you just request a connection for and then connects you to someone. Boardy actually tells you, hey, I don't think this connection is actually good for you. Let's set up a call every week.
Interesting.
And I want you to like update me on like let me help you create a plan for like, how you can like actually work with that connection or actually get that connection.
A life coach.
Yeah, it's like exactly like a life coach, right? Because one thing we've seen very often is like people, like hundreds of people come to Boardy and they're like, I need an investor. But oftentimes they're not at the stage where an investor will want to talk to them, right? And so we can't make those introductions. But instead, what we could say is, instead, I will connect you with someone who might be able to help you with growth, or someone who might be able to help you with the engineering challenges that you're facing, right? So you can sort of mold the connections, and you can sort of convince people to work with different kinds of people, and basically just guide them along that trajectory, right? So instead of Boardy feeling like this AI agent or this AI assistant, he actually becomes this like AI main character that you want to talk to, like a life coach, basically, right? As you said it perfectly. And I think that's where we want to be over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. That's I'm definitely gonna keep my eyes open for Boardy's trajectory.
Yeah.
I think you guys will do amazing things.
Thank you.
Moving on to the final section, like advice and closing. So, what's one piece of advice you'd give to a teenager who wants to make a startup tomorrow?
Yeah. I'll give the advertising advice, which is use Boardy.
Okay.
And this is actually like not. So I'll give the advertising advice. I'll give some actual advice. Number one, I think like use Boardy because I think like right now we're trying to basically find the hidden gems, right? A lot of these VCs, these investors, they want to meet a lot of people, and they've actually developed programs to like, have scouts at universities and stuff, right? So they want to find people who are going to build the companies in the next couple of years, that are going to be $1 billion companies. But Boardy can fast track you to those VCs. And so if you're building something if you want to start up tomorrow, talk to Boardy, number one. He can help you. He can definitely help you out. And also reach out to me as well. I'd love to hear your journey. But in terms of another piece, like an actual piece of advice that I would give to someone who is wanting to start a startup tomorrow. Let's see. I think the key thing, especially if you're young, one skill that is very much not taught is the concept of being someone who under promises and over delivers. And I've seen this time and time again. Like a lot of these students, they can talk the talk, but they won't walk the walk. And my belief is that like the world runs on relationships. And if you're able to just do what you said you would do, and honestly even over deliver, that is how you get the opportunities. That's how you build respect with people. That's how you build trust with people. And you may not see it now, but those are the people that you might have worked with 5 years ago. If you create a good impression on them, they may give you opportunities, right, in the future when they think about, okay, who is someone that I can trust? Who is someone that actually does who keeps to their word, right? I think like those are the kinds of people that will give you those opportunities. You know what I mean? So I think this is something that like I would attribute most of my success to, is the fact that every time I have made a promise, or not, I guess sometimes I've broken promises, but for all the big promises that I've made, I have done my absolute best to keep them, right? And this sort of applies to me working 18 hours a day for like at age of 0, right? And basically just doing everything I can to make these companies successful. And it's the same thing that I do with Boardy, right? And I think it's that sort of premise that is very much not taught nowadays. But if you're able to master it, if you're able to make these promises and actually follow through on them, you will skyrocket your growth, seriously. Not only promising to other people, but also just promising to yourself, right? Obviously, you need discipline for that, and that's a skill that you need to build. But I think it is a game changer.
Fantastic advice. Okay, my next question is, what are some resources like books, podcast communities, or like residencies, for example, that have helped you and you would recommend to other aspiring young founders?
Yeah, I think there's a lot out there. I think honestly, like so for me personally, like I'm actually currently going through that process of finding those communities, those books and stuff. I think for me, a lot of it was just conversations with people. Like I went to a lot of networking events. I just like had mentors I found people that were like giving me advice because of my age. Like for example, this one guy I met at the first office that I worked at. He was building like a valet company. And he scaled to several $1 million in recurring revenue, and he was giving us a lot of advice on like how we can structure our business plan and stuff, right? So just by sort of starting, you will starting and also putting yourself out there, like going to these events, like just talking to people about what you're doing, you will inherently get advice, right? Now the other thing I think is like you should figure out like what you are looking for. Like if you feel lonely, like you should find communities, and I think there's like Z Fellows is one of them. The Residency is another one of them that like I can name off the top of my head. In terms of like communities that will help you find ambitious and like-minded people that you can work with. So I would say like if you feel like that the founder path is super lonely, then like you're definitely finding people in those, or even reaching out to those people like on Twitter and like I think like having conversations with them would be super helpful. And in terms of like advice or like books I've read, I actually don't read that many like of these books when it comes to like building a startup. I think generally speaking, I've had personally a very trial and error type of journey, and so I can't recommend any books that have strongly changed my life. But I also would want to pose to you, if you're thinking about it, which is like, I think failure is the best teacher, and actually just doing the thing, trying it out, and failing or succeeding, but failing will teach you way more than any book will ever tell you. And I think like the reason why, like from like just personally, I used to think about like, oh yeah, like am I following this guideline correctly? Like am I following the Lean Startups guideline correctly? But like man, there's really no one really knows what the hell they're doing. And it's sort of just I think it's sort of just up to you to figure it out. And honestly, that is the journey. Like that is part of the journey, and that is part of what makes it so fulfilling, is realizing that like you can identify these problems that you're facing and then solve them yourself. I think that is like incredibly important. So I guess in conclusion, like I wouldn't recommend many books, but I do recommend just going out, trying things, failing, and then out of necessity being either finding things like finding books, resources, or talking to ChatGPT, or finding mentors out of necessity because you've tried something and you have failed and you want to get actual actionable advice for those things. But otherwise, man, just do it. Just do it. Just take the leap.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier that being technical is a pretty important skill, especially in today's day and age. Are there any specific skills or experiences, whether they're hard skills or soft skills, that you would recommend?
Yeah. I think being able to talk to AIs and keeping up to date with trends is like incredibly important, because the AI space is like transforming radically, and for a lot of people, like basically, it is a tool in your tool set that it allows you to do effectively anything, right? And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to leverage it to your advantage and use it very often, then you're going to fall behind, right? Because you're going to have people that have these tools and know how to use them properly, and they're able to acquire knowledge and use it and leverage it so much better than you can, right? So I would say number one, like learn how to talk to AIs. Um,
Yeah.
Number two, in terms of like a soft skill, I think expectation setting is incredibly important. Like I guess this sort of connects to like doing what you said you would. But I think for a lot of ambitious people, like there's also some level of like like they take on more than they can handle, right? Because they want to prove themselves. But I think just like think about what's reasonable, right? Think like learn how to set those expectations. Set expectations with yourself. Set expectations with other people. And sure, you can like make these promises, but it's one thing to like make a promise, but like it's another thing to make a promise and then like update people on those promises, how it's going, make them feel heard, make it feel like you're actually working towards it, and continuously setting those expectations and making sure that they're going to they feel hurt, like people feel that you can actually do the thing that you're going to say that you're going to do. And I think that's a big part of expectation setting, right? Is like not only just starting with that promise and then delivering it, but also just like that journey of like communicating and just becoming an effective communicator. I think that's where expectation setting comes in, and I think it's a super important skill.
Yeah. Okay, second to last question. If you could go back in time right now, what would you tell your 13, 14-year-old self about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think a lot of I may be wrong, but if you're anything like me, which is you're like a very insecure overachiever, you can get stressed very often about like what is my life going to look like, and if I was to, for example, drop out of school, drop out of university, like what the hell would I do, right? But I think what I've realized is you need to sort of like learn how to trust yourself, right? And the only times when you can actually accomplish something are when you go like balls deep, like when you just go all in, right? And you like screw it, I'm not doing university, and like I think when you sort of just let go of all of the restrictions or all the fallbacks, right? That is actually when you can start to prove to yourself that like, oh yeah, like you're able to do things that are insanely valuable, right? Or build incredibly valuable things, right? I think I always used to, for me, I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to do with my life. And so just realizing that like, you trust your intuition, trust yourself, everything's going to be okay. And take the risks that other people, may look down upon at the time, right? Because you need to prove to them that you're capable of doing these things, and you need to prove them wrong. So yeah, I would say yeah, just trust yourself, and it's going to be okay. Take the leap of faith.
Yeah. So, do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement for young founders today?
Yeah. Words of encouragement and final thoughts. I think young founders today are uniquely poised to like literally change the world. Genuinely. If you've ever thought about starting a startup, like take some time to go all in. And like really vet it out and really do it, and do it well, because I think that's sort of like how you can, number one, like, I think just the path of entrepreneurship is so much more rewarding than working a 9 to 5. But also, there's no better time than now to start a business. As I said before, like in my journey, right? Like no one really knows what they're doing. And you may think that you need to become this perfect version of yourself. Or like you may need to like graduate with, with a degree in college because you need the knowledge or something of that nature. But for most things, you can sort of just figure it out. And that's actually what most business people do, right? Is they come in unprepared, but they figure it out on the way. And I think, just don't worry about, having to think about, oh yeah, like, am I really there? Is this the right time for me to do it? Right? Just do it, and you'll fail. You'll either fail, which means that you will learn a lot, and you'll probably learn a lot more than you would at a regular internship or anything of that nature. Or you'll succeed, in which case you could just continue working on it, right? And then you will have done what you said you wanted to do. So I think that's like one piece of advice that I would give, and also, man, like I think, like me personally, like I realize that life is long. You have a lot of time as a young person, and so there's a lot of like you can make a lot of mistakes, and still end up being totally perfect. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because it means that a lot of people are thinking about like, oh yeah, like what if my startup fails in the next year? Like you can start another one, right? You can start one in 5 years, you can start one in 10 years, you can start one in 20 years, right? Like the world is like, your life is so long, and you have this entire time frame to do what you want to do, right? So that's another thing I would say.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been a really, really informative episode, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate you too. Yeah.